Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 12. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice, General Partner of Project Voice Capital Partners, and your host for what will be a great discussion of some interesting stories this week, especially one yesterday, talking about everything going on at AWS reInvent. Got a great panel. I'm excited to hear them share with us all that they do. I'm aware of it to some degree, but it's always fun to hear from them. And John, I'm going to start with you. Take a moment, share with us who you are, who you're with, what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. Appreciate the invite. Again, my name is John Hilton. I work with LBMC. I'm a shareholder here, and I run our consulting and business intelligence practice. So relevant to our conversation, I run more of the business intelligence, which is really around data modernization and AI. And really, that's my background. I came from, worked at ExxonMobil before doing a lot of digital innovation, which got me more into data, and then at EY, and then finally here at LBMC. Kind of say I started my career at the U.S. Army, though, so it was interesting to blow up and break things, but now move into creating value-added objects. But I really am really interested in AI. It's really where I have more of my background in, even in my master's program. Last thing about me is I'm a father of 4 kids, and my wife and I live here in Franklin, Tennessee. So excited to be part of the program today, Bradley.
John, it's great to have you, and always good to have a Nashville resident where I lived for 20 years and where I still live in spirit. Titans managed to win a game, so it's not full on tank mode. Separate conversation, separate podcast. John, thank you for joining us. Next up is Nate Korhonen. Nate, tell me if I'm pronouncing that right. Share with us who you are, who you're with, and what you do.
John will be able to relate to this. I think I was in the Navy, and so they abused me of saying my last name properly ever again, and so I don't even bother to anymore either. So you nailed it. Nice to be with you this morning. We've got some Tennessee representation. I'm down here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Lived for the last 13 years, and I work for Very is really an IoT full spectrum consultancy, and we work with customers from back of the paper napkin on a concept that they might have all the way through launch of commercial products. That could be B2B or B2C. And so that's been fun to serve alongside practices in design, data science, and data engineering, software engineering across a spectrum of disciplines, hardware engineering across a spectrum of disciplines like mechanical, mechatronics, electrical, and so forth. And of course, AI, machine learning, and data emphasis is becoming more integral into all those different aspects. Myself, I would be, I guess, what you could call a triple PM. So have a strong background of project, program, and product management over the last 15, 20 years. And particularly for me, it's fascinating to see the spectrum of what businesses are coming to the table to for initiatives. And they tend to fall into 2 categories of either ways to optimize or streamline internal business practices, focused on their own success, or they're thinking about some initiative that has a profitability or growth external customer component. And it used to be just questions of, well, what is it that AI might do? And now it's turning into how can I start to tap into that? And I think that segues kind of nicely with what John was talking about with his practice and his focus, because the wave of data isn't yet done. People are still struggling on the maturity curve there. And now this wave is crashing in and ratcheting up that pain level tremendously, which some of these articles we'll get into, I'm sure touch on.
It's a good point. How quickly we've moved from, if you were to draw a pie chart of what percentage of people are out there saying, when is the world going to wake up to AI being a gimmick, versus how do we deploy this in our organization in a meaningful way, it's, you know, it's a full circle, you know. I mean, it's a negligible, you know, undetectable part, being the former. Nate, thank you for being part of the show. Next up, we got Tyler Bryden. Tyler, it's great to have you on the show. Tell us about yourself. Tell us who you're with, and tell us what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Bradley. A big fan, so it's an honor to be here. I'm Tyler. I'm calling from just outside Toronto, so we've got unlikely sun and warmth here today, so very happy about that. I'm coming in a good mood, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Speak AI. Started in 2019, launched the first version of the product in 2020. At the time, we were focusing on, you know, what some people might call archaic techniques that I actually think are super valuable, which are sort of sentiment analysis, named entity recognition, all these sort of extraction capabilities. And we were working really closely with a lot of research teams, whether they're a firm or internally within an organization, to take generally focus groups, in-depth interviews, or like open-ended survey responses and run analysis on that. So what's nice is we're sort of working on the interaction layer through like an actual UI. So we're seeing a lot of interesting things emerge here. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of that today. And, you know, now I think right now as we speak, probably about 125,000 people have used or are using the platform. So we've seen the good, we've seen the bad, and have learned a lot along the journey, and hope to get to share some insights here today. And thanks again for having me.
That's great. Yeah, it's impressive what you built. And Tyler, thank you for joining us. And next up, we got Vic Murthy. Vic, share with us a little bit about who you are, who you're with, what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, for having me on, and hello to the audience out there. I, like John, am joining from Franklin, Tennessee. And Bradley, your comment about tanking hit home, because I'm a Bears fan, and we've been tanking for basically a decade, maybe 2 decades. So totally get it. But I'm the Vice President of Client Solutions for Asurion. And before I go into what I do and my team does, it's probably worth spending a couple minutes on Asurion, because I don't think many are familiar with it. But we are a global tech care company that offers device protection, support, and repair solutions to customers worldwide. So we have a customer base of over 100 million customers, and our offerings are mainly found through our channel partners. So most of them are mobile carriers, so think Verizon, AT&T, and then there's also consumer electronics companies, or you know, Amazon being an example of one of them. So we're headquartered here in Nashville. We operate globally. We've got a presence in, you know, North America, Latin America, APAC, EU. So really truly a global operation. And in terms of what my team does is we partner with one of our major North American clients to design a product strategy and roadmap, right, that satisfies their strategic goals. And so we're either product-y salespeople or salesy product people. I'm not sure where we fall in that continuum, but we live in that space. And so where AI comes into play is it's embedded in many of our solutions that we offer at Asurion. And so we mainly use it to serve customers better, personalize their experience, and deter things like fraud that cause kind of issues and waste for our program. Before Asurion, I was at Discover Card for roughly 10 years. So held roles in digital marketing and new product development, and typically, you know, lived at the intersection or lived in the arena of, you know, meeting customers where they're at, delivering the right message to them, and connecting them to the service that they need. And so, like I said, I'm in Franklin, have a wife, 3 kids, so plenty to do in the household, but having a lot of fun.
Vic, it's great to have you join us. And so, yeah, we got good Tennessee representation. And I'll throw Tyler a bone. I happened to see a little bit of the Raptors beat the Kevin Durant Suns last night. So that's something to be proud of. But yeah, Vic, I'll date myself before we get into the news. I was, I lived in Nashville for 20 plus years, and been a Titans fan since 1999 when they moved into the city. And it was a decade ago or so when the Bears rolled into Nashville and they beat the Titans, like it was like 55-7 or something. And instead of the headline being that the Titans lost in blowout fashion, the headline was actually that so many Bears fans rolled into downtown Nashville that they drank all the beer out of Broadway. You can Google this.
I remember this because I had friends living down here who were more proud of that than the Bears victory.
Yeah, well, the whole thing was an atrocity that I barely ever speak of. So thank you for bringing that up,
Yes.
or causing me to bring it up, actually more accurately. But gentlemen, thank you all for being here. And with that, we'll get to the news. So the two stories that'll start us off, 1A and 1B, I'm going to read both of these. The headline from both. The first is from Ars Technica. Amazon lays off Alexa employees as 2010's voice assistant boom gives way to AI. Amazon has had a notoriously hard time making money from Alexa. And then story 1B here is from something called SiliconANGLE, which is super corporate. I don't know if we've ever used this source before, but a pretty good article about AWS. The headline is AWS unveils new tools and services for, quote, supernova of generative AI. So I'm going to go in the same order that we did the intros in. So John, I'm going to start with you, and then Nate and Tyler and Vic, and then we'll reverse for the second story. But John, interesting couple of articles here. reInvent's been in the news this week. I want to get just generally what, if anything, stood out to you from either of these articles, and moving forward, and post ChatGPT, how do you view Amazon's positioning? Do you think that they're weakened and defensive and in chaos, or do you feel like they're on a mission and deliberate and poised for newfound success? Share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question. First, if you ever been out to AWS reInvent in Vegas, it's a sight to be seen. Just the volume of people, the number of hotel spaces they take up, and a lot of the content there is pretty amazing. And one of the best parts is when they are early in the week, when they're able to talk about their new product lines and upgrades to different cloud services, especially. What I took most out of that was the Q, right? That was the big announcement, was their Amazon Q now. That's really essentially their ability to take these large language models and integrate it through their entire stack. I was reading more about it, ability to, now you can use it on Redshift, integrate it with Redshift to help write SQL queries. There's this new Bedrock, their AI catalog that it can interact with, and essentially can help everything from coding to working through all, other data structures that you have. And really, if I step back, I really would see, my viewpoint on what's happening is you're seeing, like said Bradley, where does Amazon stand? Microsoft is out there pushing Copilot. We are going to see Copilot in Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint. It's there. It's gaining traction. And so the biggest question I think a lot of these companies, whether it's Google, AWS, or Microsoft, is really, I think, trying to address is, how do we first get these large language models into the hands of everyday work? And so if that's the case, then the easy button was Outlook and emails, et cetera, and Google, if you're using Slack, et cetera. And so where does Amazon fit? And so I think Amazon recognizes that a lot of their customers, build it for a lot of their tech stack. So how can they deeply integrate into their tech stack with coding, et cetera? I definitely think that it's a play towards keeping up with where Google is, where Microsoft is with their relationship with OpenAI. And if I really just step back overall, what I do really think is happening is a continued abstraction of AI into an enterprise and into technology. And what I mean by that is, how do we continue to leverage these large language models into everything that you do, maybe not even in Outlook and email, but really even just in coding, and really how do I optimize my servers, et cetera? And so you can see that's a strong play there. And I'll just conclude with this is, I think what's most interesting from some of the work with Q and with Bedrock is this move towards the AI catalog in the cloud. And so what used to be before, I need my storage and my compute here to really accelerate, and then my machine learning, but really to really get my enterprise going. What you're seeing now is, well, there's so many of these large language models that are coming out. I mean, Llama 2, alone has, the 3 versions, the 2B, the 30B, 70B parameter versions. And so in GPT 3, 5, 4, 4, 5 now. And they all come with trade-offs of cost and efficiency and querying time, et cetera. And so, it's interesting now that AI stool is getting built up as a catalog now that in AWS you can simply go grab it. And so I think it's interesting, in conclusion, that they're moving towards competing with AWS and Google, and secondly, that they're kind of moving towards this catalog feature.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. I agree with a lot of what you said. And Nate, I'm going to come to you. Same question. You got 2 interesting articles sort of looking at 2 different things. AWS reInvent obviously has been going on this week. A couple of different ways to pick up the prism of Amazon and look at it and interpret it. Share with us your thoughts.
When I saw the article on the laying off of the staff for the Echo, and I remember it might have been a couple of years ago where I had seen an article that referenced the massive loss that they were having as a division on those devices. And, I don't care who you are, you lose billions of dollars, that's a double take. And digging into that a little bit more, it reminded me of, y'all remember back in the 2000s, Google had the free 411 phone line that you could call up and ask for directions. And it was offering a service to users. This guy didn't know, what are they really doing? Oh, we're getting ready to do things like be able to have an Echo, I switched from Google to AWS, but as an industry, we were building one layer of a capability that then would let us go develop the next layer of a capability and so forth. And so I kind of see a progression here where, the thought from a internal capability perspective was like, get the technology from a hardware capability and from an orchestration capability in sync with what we're trying to achieve. Mission accomplished. Did it ever commercialize? No. You looked at some of those links here for the new AI infused Alexa version of the Echo, and the gal is walking around her house having a conversation and play me this jazz song, give me a dinner party idea. They're trying to move forward, but what was noticeably different about that marketing was they didn't slip any kind of a thing where she's like, oh, and put that in my cart and let me buy that. So there seems to be this emphasis now on they're shifting, and this goes a little bit to John's point, they're shifting towards how do we take this capability and now operationalize it in the governance and the DevOps and in the day-to-day use of business capabilities. Where is that going to come out in more commercial consumer offerings? That's to be determined. But clearly from a investment of people and time and energy, like the Google 411 phone line, sounds like Amazon got what they needed from that era, and now it's on to the next.
I had forgotten completely about the Google 411 line. Thank you for that. That brought back a lot of different nostalgia. Points well taken. Tyler, I'm coming to you. You've heard Nate and John at this point. Same question, interesting articles. What stood out? Your thoughts on Amazon moving forward?
Yeah. I guess I'll address the first one, which is the layoffs. I think we're all here because we love voice, obviously. And so I think I actually find it sort of sad. I think it was a great sort of undertaking and initiative that to me held a lot of promise. And at the same time, as someone who so deeply loves this, I've never, used these products or adopted them in any meaningful way. So I think as an advocate or an early adopter of this kind of tech, it's sort of clear that sort of makes sense. I found it interesting that they actually they have 2/3 of the smart speaker market and still getting 1 billion interactions a week. So it's like there's still usage here. It's just obviously not driving the business outcomes that they're looking for. And I think it's been a lot of downstream effects. I think, Bradley, there's a company, or Toronto company, VoiceFlow, who built an incredible business around sort of Alexa, Google Assistant interactions. And with some of the degradation of these sort of services has had to make a pivot into sort of knowledge bases and stuff. And so I think we're seeing quite a consequences of this sort of shuttering of operations. And then the last part I just think on this story is it's interesting because in a way these, the AI advancements are making some, to me, shifts in the capabilities of these systems that are more in the outcome that we wanted to. So we're seeing this with ChatGPT embedding the voice interactions actually in the application. I think that's a very natural, intuitive interface that if, Amazon could, in a way reinvent this interaction through the AI and make it a little bit more natural and seamless versus a bunch of if-then conditions, I think there actually is a valuable technology here. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's sad for me to see this. And then on the generative AI part from Amazon and reInvent, I think the one story that was super interesting that came out of this was like Google's advertising on Sphere during this. So, Google very aggressively marketing during this event, right on about the biggest canvas or billboard that you can get. And from actual functionality, I think the piece that's super interesting to me or compelling about Amazon is that they've got basically the permissions that you have in AWS, which can handle the interaction through Q. So blocking off data that one employee shouldn't see versus another, having that capability in-house and allowing you to, get the knowledge that you should actually have access to as an employee on that team, I think is a very valuable, benefit, differentiator that Amazon has in this last piece. And I think just a couple last quick points on it, first of all, there's a relationship that Amazon they've got Cohere, they've got Anthropic here, and yet they're going for relatively a service offering, a business offering that does have, I think, some direct competitive forces through teams that they've actually invested in and embedded deeply into some of their infrastructure. And then the last part, I'll just say, a couple of weeks ago, after Dev Day at OpenAI and before this whole chaos, in that the sort of messaging was, hey, all startups are dead. OpenAI is the clear-cut winner here. And to me, that never felt right. I think Amazon has a lot of capacity to execute on this. They've got Olympus. They're building it, millions and millions of dollars going into this. So I think Amazon's going to be a big player in this space and excited to see them continue.
I like that. And just to touch on one thing, I'll touch on Alexa just to close in a second after Vic gives us his thoughts. But, I lived through a lot of articles saying Amazon Alexa is here, all startups are dead. And it was interesting to see, OpenAI and ChatGPT is here, all startups are dead. And after all of the drama with them, it feels like that's been sort of properly readjusted backward. It's interesting to hear you call attention to that. Vic, you've heard some great comments on these two stories and just Amazon in general. Want to get your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll hit kind of each one quickly, and then there was kind of a central theme I noticed with both. So in terms of where Amazon is, I don't think it's a state of chaos. I think it's I think Nate put it well. It's like the next step in their evolution, right? So if you think about Amazon Alexa, phase one was probably win the home hub device market, and they have soundly done that. I mean, Google's got a device. I know Facebook experimented, but really, Amazon is a clear-cut winner. And so now it's how do we engage people more consistently and monetize this service? And I think that's where this next evolution. I don't know if it's going to do that. I mean, we'll see. The article said the new wave is kind of built to solve. You have more conversational commands and improve response speed were two of the benefits. I don't know if those are huge pain points with customers, right? I think it's more about how can Alexa be top of mind when I need to connect to the services I need through Amazon? And I think they've got to solve that. I think they've got to be very upfront with what the tangible benefits are. I think this next evolution will help them get there. I don't know if it's the end all be all, but I wouldn't be surprised if this next phase comes out and there's a little bit of tinkering after that. This may be a multi-year journey. I don't think it's tough to nail that right the very first time. So, and then just as another aside is the marketing guy in me, I read in that article that they were debating getting rid of the Alexa voice prompt, which I actually think is a mistake. I think it's kind of like Kleenex or Coke, where it's synonymous for voice operated command. I have a connected car. And when I activate the voice commands, I mistakenly say Alexa, and the system in the car knows to filter out Alexa, right, and not put that into the song I'm requesting or whatever it is. So pretty interesting there. I hope they keep Alexa for their sake. Second article, I started reading it. My first thought was, this isn't my wheelhouse. Then I got to the article. I'm like, this is definitely not my wheelhouse, the enterprise space. But what really jumped out to me was, there was a quote about a supernova, right? And there's all these superlatives that are used to describe what AI can do and just the amazing future it could paint. And it could. I'm not saying it couldn't, but really, I thought the most insightful thing in the articles, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he compared one of the AI-driven capabilities to like traffic control for your internal network. And I thought that is more of what companies need to focus on, is how do I build the right story around AI? Because pretty soon it's going to be, and maybe not pretty soon, maybe now, it's everybody's got great LLMs, right? Everybody's algorithms are perfect. Their data sets are huge. But then can I build the right story where if I go in to pitch this to a client, they're going to say, yeah, you understand my business, you understand my needs. This AI-driven solution solves the problem. And probably most importantly, you're going to help me put together a journey or roadmap to get there. Because I think that is a huge struggle for both large and small companies. So, it's great that this new capability is out, but I think really the challenge is going to be how can Amazon build the right story, right, for companies to have high demand of this. And I think that was really the central theme in both consumer and business is, again, AI is great. There's a lot of buzz around it. There's a lot of excitement around it, but pretty soon you're going to get to that phase and we're probably already there of like, okay, what is it really going to do for me? And unless you have a very clear story and articulation of that, you run the risk of falling flat. But I think Amazon will figure it out. They typically do figure stuff out. So it may take some time, but I think they will.
No, that's great. And just great comments all the way around. I'll put a button on that. I want to move on to the second story so we have plenty of time to discuss that as well, because it's pretty interesting. But I don't want to leave this without commenting, like I have commented before at different points on this show, the disrespect that the media shows Alexa is so terrible. I want to reread this headline. So Amazon lays off Alexa employees as 2010's voice assistant boom gives way to AI. Okay, well, first of all, I think I read probably 10,000 articles about Alexa over the last 6 or 7 years. And the description of Alexa as AI was like in 95% of them. So it's interesting to see that now whatever Alexa is, the voice assistant boom, like that's something like in the distant past or something like 2010s, like that's way over there and we're over here now. It's just super disrespectful. And it's really interesting to see the media kind of really, really want to cast aspersions on that. And there's a more complicated story with Alexa. Obviously it came out, or it did, it thrived. It was ubiquitous at a time when the world was in calamity with the pandemic and the whole world is moving down Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the whole world is thinking less about privacy and security concerns and more about survival. So everyone was cool with Alexa for a while. Now we've ratcheted back up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Privacy and security is now a concern again. People are mad at Alexa for like violating that again. And so we've got a complicated relationship with Alexa. This article is a very good representation of that. And it is interesting to note that, what we call today as AI, are we going to call that AI in 3 years? Are we going to use some other like disparaging term like non-AI for ChatGPT and something 2 or 3 years from now? It's interesting to sort of think about Alexa and ChatGPT as chapters 1 and 2 of not a 2-chapter book, but a 20-chapter book. So anyway, I always want to throw in there the media disrespecting Alexa. Sorry for my tirade. But we'll move on to give us plenty of time for this next story. I'm going to read it. It's from ABC News. Famous author's lawsuit against ChatGPT developer gets underway. Authors like John Grisham and George R.R. Martin are suing over AI concerns. Vic, I'm going to start with you and go in the reverse order from what we discussed the first story in. This is interesting. I think there's already been a ton of lawsuits against OpenAI and other AI companies, some of which make the news, most of which don't. What do you see when you look at a story like this? Share with us your thoughts.
My first reaction was we could kind of see this coming, and I think there's going to be more of this, unfortunately, because if you think about it, you can go on ChatGPT and have it write a poem about laptops in a Shakespearean style, and it does reasonably well, right? So if I'm an author or original content creator, I'm really concerned, because who's to say someone's like, hey, I wish John Grisham wrote a novel about X. Let me just have ChatGPT write it in his style, and then I can read or listen to whatever I want. And this is their livelihood, right? So I think they're, I'm not surprised, right, that they did this, and I think there's going to be more of it. And it just kind of underscores the need for governance. I know, Bradley, we've talked about kind of governance and acceptable standards, but I think that topic's going to come into the forefront here, because it's a moving train. Things are changing fast, and so typically, when you have industries that are growing quickly, the standards and the controls follow, and they're really hard to implement, and they don't always do the best job of corralling it. So I think it underscores the need to get that governance. And again, being a product person, the thought of governance, I hate it, but I think in this case, like, it is completely needed.
Do you see the end game? I'll ask everyone this as we go down the panel. Do you see the end game, the resolution, the ultimate destination for this conflict being that rights holders are paid some indeterminate amount of money as royalties, or do you see that being so complicated it's hard to figure out and just forget it? You're not doing any of this, and the outcome is something not being allowed. What your thoughts, Vic?
I think it's too complicated. I think it'll be tough, and then you'll have to negotiate what's the right amount of royalty, right? I think you're going to get into that. I think it's going to trend more towards, if you are an original content creator, maybe there's some type of exclusion, right, that you could do, like a John Grisham can kind of put his, have his name excluded. I think that's going to be difficult as well. But I think the royalty concept is going to be tough to implement.
Just good to get different thoughts on that, because it seems pretty tough to tell where it might go. Tyler, I'm coming to you. Yeah. Same question. Interesting story. Probably just the beginning of a lot more of this type of thing to come. Your thoughts, and what do you think the ultimate resolution of stuff like this will end up being?
Yeah, I think this article, and it just gave me more questions than answers. So I'm interested in this lawsuit here. How definitive is the proof that they've sort of explicitly scraped this data? I mean, or can they prove that? I think we all have the idea that based on the corpus that they did, it's most likely that some of their, literary works were actually included in this scrape and then got to this output. But to retract that down is something, very compelling, and that sort of, takes cracking open OpenAI's entire scraping process to understand this and really figure that out. So I don't know if that's going to be, possible. The other thing that sort of stuck out to me was actually this precedent not the precedent, but the amount. So they said that it's paying up to $150,000 for each infringed work. And when I think of, Game of Thrones, I actually think, each one of his work is probably worth a lot more than $150,000. So this sort of bar of money is very fascinating to me. And so my question is also around, what are these authors who are in this original lawsuit trying to do? Are they trying to set a basemark precedent of what that payment should be? And again, there's a huge difference between, Game of Thrones writer and an author who's maybe, has a couple thousand book sales. So how do we treat this huge discrepancy between how popular books are and how, valued that commercial enterprise is? So I think we're going to see that. I think a question, do we move towards, if this licensing or royalty fee is possible, do we move towards this idea more of like the Spotify piece, where in general artists seem like they're relatively unhappy with how much they're getting paid. And it takes a massive amount of viewership or audience to actually build sort of a sustainable, lifestyle through the work that you're doing. So I think there's a lot of questions there. And then I guess the last part of this, and this is selfishly personal, but like, we've embedded OpenAI into our platform. And, I know OpenAI has created this fund where they say, hey, we're going to help fund your risk if you're going to get sued for any sort of copyright infringement, or at least that was some of the messaging here. So I think companies who have embedded this technology into the product relatively quickly, and most likely because the commercial demand didn't give them much other choice, what are the ramifications or consequences for them? Does this pass down at all?
That's a good question. Yeah, I forgot about that. But there's so many things going on. It's easy to forget about stuff like that. That's a great point. Nate, I'm coming to you. Same question. Interesting article, interesting times. Your thoughts on the piece and where you see this eventually heading.
Kind of rapid fire round robin. I'm having to like re-editorialize my thoughts here. I'm feeling like one of those shows on a sports network. I mean, Vic and Tyler both, and I know John's going to in a moment too, are just making some killer points. And that was right where my mind went to as well. Tyler was RIAA. Why haven't they hopped on this bandwagon yet and jumped out in front of this? I feel like it's 1999 or 2003, and we're about to get in another round of Napster lawsuits around copying MP3s and music. And so the question does come back to me from the perspective of the plaintiff in this, being a creative professional. It's very similar to what's happening with SAG and the movie industry. And if I try to abstract out of that, kind of with what John was saying about abstraction, as a business stakeholder, you're probably asking where are the areas where I'm feeling threatened? Something that I was doing that was valuable for a customer or for an internal stakeholder yesterday. Now there's another avenue to this that's on parity or more valuable, and now I'm not providing that value. I'm feeling threatened. What do I do about that? There's a lot of things that are going to get sorted out, just like Vic is saying. I totally agree. There's going to be governance and regulation and you name it. The whole cryptocurrency thing really put a nice underscore and exclamation point on that. But beyond just the ramifications from a regulatory or a legal outcome, it really also begs the question of, what are we going to find valuable? So, and Vic was talking about the idea of, write me a novel, in the style of this author in a certain way. And it's a powerful example. And we hear a lot of these. I wonder if at some point people are going to continue to have a preference for, good farm to table salted butter versus margarine. Like, are they going to see and detect that difference? And how will businesses learn to season AI into their offerings in such a way as to make them still have that taste and that end customer experience that is authentic and remarkable and valuable at the end of the day. I think that's really the question there. Regulation is going to sort itself out, but what is valuable? Where's that? That's the question I think that's really being asked. And if I'm creating that value, how do I get paid for it?
Yeah, I like that way of framing that. And John, you've heard some great comments, as Nate was alluding to, from the three other panelists. Interesting article, interesting news, interesting questions it raises. Want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it raises some interesting questions around copyright. And I think that, I always go back to Coming to America, the movie, if you remember that one. And they had McDowell's versus McDonald's. They didn't have the golden arches. They had the golden arcs. And so it's interesting in this world of copyright how these types of things come about, and then how people try to get around them. And in that sense, it's a comical sense, but it was a funny illustration of copyright in America in our capitalistic society. I first start with this is, I tend to look at AI right now from an industrial revolution standpoint. And if I love history. It's probably what I would have done if I didn't get into data and AI. But if you really think about industrial revolutions, they usually come with several societal changes, political changes, cultural changes. Some good, some not so good. So I think of coal mines, the advent of steam and this movement towards modernization. Well, you definitely want the coal and the steam, but you don't want kids in coal mines, right? And all of these things. And so, regulatory frameworks, laws have to change, culture has to change, because of really what comes with technological advancement is some ills in society that have to be corrected through legislation or a regulatory framework. And so I think it was well said already that, regulations tend to follow. And so in this case, when I love the Napster illustration. I was thinking about that as well, as we had to go through that process to kind of get to a point of Spotify now. And so as I think about this, is where's this going to land? Probably somewhere in that space. First, I think legally this will have to get itself worked out. It's going to go through the courts. It's going to have to go through, and then companies by nature will then mitigate their risk accordingly to how they're going to manage it. So as I see it, really, a few outcomes potentially could happen relative to is this content actually then gets royalties. Well, likely then they'll probably become, I could imagine a platform one day where publishers and writers are able to determine whether they will or will not submit their content into a place that AI, maybe it's a coalition or conglomerate, can then go utilize those data as a data mart for potential use or not. That's a potential future if in fact we start to go down copyright infringement. What I'm also very interested in is on the backside of it, is on copyright infringement of what the output is, not just the input. And so I've heard at least some, we're in Tennessee. Country music is a lifeblood to the city of Nashville. And so I know that our political leaders in this state are working towards how to deal with outputs relative to voice. In fact, last night I was talking to a leader in the state legislature. We're talking about this year's legislative session coming forward with voices and how to protect people's voices, singer-songwriters' voices in this age of AI. And so I think you're going to see that as while it's a lot murkier and harder to really figure out the input part of it, the output part of it is going to be where there's a lot of attention and focus, I think, in the near term to really protect that content. The other thing I'll add about copyright from just the complexity standpoint is I think some of these rules that were created, the 10% rule, for instance, it was very interesting when a lot of content needed to be created manually. I mean, it's tough to take someone's work and go through it and say, well, what's 10%, what's not 10%? But now that 10% can kind of get created quickly or changed, based on a prompt, are some of those rules I would imagine are up for future debate and up for future change as well in this age of algorithmic changes and AI changes to original content. So my wife and I were talking about this last night, and it's really about, I think with these changes, is about how do you embrace it and move forward and find these common ground where your content can be leveraged for the models in a win-win situation, and at the same time on the back end, how do you protect people with content they've already created from getting built upon on the outputs of AI, such that again it's a win-win for this industry as a whole.
It's interesting, right? And just great comments on both stories. Certainly, this one. It's interesting to think about how these AI lawsuits and litigation and these concerns over rights infringement have caused us to sort of evolve our thinking. If you follow just what the media presents, you probably sit there thinking that it's a foregone conclusion that there will be massive court victories against ChatGPT for stuff like impersonating the style of an author. But when you start to dig in a little bit further, you really see how murky the waters are. And I'll give you an example. So, if I'm, raised as a child reading the Harry Potter series, I read it every day, and I know all the characters. I can tell you, what book, different things happen in. I can tell you all the differences between the books and the movies. I can tell you everything about everything. When I grow up, I write a book, and it can't help but emulate the style of J.K. Rowling. Now, if you want to get your measurement stick out and compute how close my writing style is to J.K. Rowling's, maybe I'm copying some of the same literary tics that she has. Maybe I'm purposefully mastering how to write it like a 5th or 6th grade level, like she does. Maybe I write the same number of books, just in homage within the same series. I could go on and on and on. Nobody would ever, under any of these scenarios, would somebody ever come back to me and say, you now owe J.K. Rowling $2.28 million, please, or whatever. And by the way, stop doing everything you're doing. It's going to be tough to figure out how to even think about the problem, and so that's kind of and the media has no way to sort of quickly present that information, so that kind of just sort of falls away. But boy, we're in for some interesting times, and I doubt that this will be the last time that this sort of issue comes up on the show.
You mind
John?
if I share just one point on that, Brad?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think John brought it up, and I just think, and you touched on it too, just such a super interesting challenge. Vic sort of brought up, like, this is just complex, and it's like, when does something get classified as a payout? And you sort of talked about the output part, where it's like, does the output match sort of a novel or, a writer's style? And there's that where the payout happens. But, to me, it's actually more around the invocation or the prompt layer. Like, did you explicitly say, write in the style of J.K. Rowling, or did you say, write a book about wizards and in this? And so very explicit versus less explicit. But if it's using the same corpus of data to produce the final output, there's a lot of nuance and gray in that area. So I think that I just thought that was so fascinating that John brought that up. And I work in marketing, and attribution is a nightmare. And so I think attribution in this case is even bigger nightmare as we actually practically play it out.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, it's obviously a key detail. But OpenAI, to my knowledge, isn't sitting there advertising ChatGPT saying, hey, come use our service as opposed to Anthropic because we can impersonate authors better. So, so it's not out front as a feature, even though it is a feature. So, yeah, I mean, your point's well taken. It'll be interesting to see sort of what our judiciary, what our court system has to say on the subject when it's all said and done. Gentlemen, I appreciate you. John, Nate, Tyler, Vic, great comments. Thank you for taking your time to share your expertise, your experience, not just me, but the audience as well. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
Thanks for having us.
You got
Thanks,
it.
Bradley.
For This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 12. Thank you for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for listening. If you're on your podcast provider of choice, until next time.